Hello, hi. I'm really sorry. These are the joy of being at home and delivering a talk. So when we get to self-driving cars, this is a bit more than a navigator. This is allowing someone to guide you. And so in this sense, you might trust it, you might not trust it, you might want to see the infrastructure, might want to make different consideration on what happens. And so are we still in control? So the more that is not about the complexity of the algorithm behind, but it is more about perhaps the situation or other factors. And these are the kind of factors that I am trying to bring into this discussion. And perhaps our control might be fading or our trust might be expanding. And so let's consider the case of healthcare. So we trust a lot of healthcare is provided by artificial intelligence as well, not only for LP detection, but during treatment, to support diagnosis, to conduct even operations. So eye operation are done by machine, by robot. They operate on your eye. Yes, they are set by the surgeon that takes the trust of, is the person that you trust, but the object that is actually performing the operation is a machine, is a robot that has been programmed to do that. And there are so many other cases, diabetes, or even just for health and fitness, we trust the machine to give us a lot of information and act upon it. So let's see what is the form of AI. What do we understand is the form of AI? Because as we've seen, there is a lot of different forms. And so the typical idea that we have of an artificial intelligent being is a robot, and this is as an anthropomorphic shape. And we do trust a kind robot. This is a typical kind of representation. Because of the form, because of the color, because of the shape, this is what we think our intelligent being will look like. But in fact, what we do, we consider the cues, we consider the auditory cues, we consider the visual cues, and we trust or not the different forms. So here there is a paper that discussed this and proposed different shapes and form of the robot. And we have also some psychology element that say that usually we trust women more than men, and we trust AI that has a more anthropomorphic form than a synthetic one. This allows us to kind of start to design what are the visual and auditory cues, whether we're actually building a robot or simply in virtual reality another human being or a representation of self or whatever it is. So a very interesting study was the Trusting Robocop by Gallimore and others. And in this case, they had 200 participants, and they showed a video in which a robot has a weapon, which is a non-lethal device, and it is trying to deter people from coming near the restricted area. And so they then asked people whether or not they would trust the robot. And they found that female reported an higher trust than male towards this kind of security guard. And so we can see that it's not only the aspect, the gender of the robot, but it is also the gender of the person that is perceiving this intelligence. And so in fact, there are several models, but this is one model by Hancock and others that includes all the different aspects. And there are mainly three factors, three big factors, and then of course different level. And so there are factors which are human related, factors which are robot related, and factors which are environmental related. So in the environment, first of all, is the task. So according to the task, you might or might not trust the artificial intelligence that has suggested, whatever the form, or suggested or is doing the job for you, because it could not be a suggestion, it could be that it's doing the form. And also it depends very much on culture, depends where this is happening, depends on the way these things is communicated, and depends on many environmental factors, whether you feel you are secure or you are in danger, whether you understand all these kind of things, your perception of the environment. So not only of like the culture, but your perception of what's happening. And so there are a lot of human related factors such as attention, expertise, competence, situation awareness, and other intrinsic characteristics, the demographic, the personality trait, our attribute, our confidence, our propensity to trust. And so if we only rely on manipulating the robot-related elements, or it could be the agent, or it could be a visual, it could be a voice only, it could be just text, this is not sufficient unless it's seen in the context of all the other elements as well. So in particular, I'm interested in the study that I will present about personality traits and how our personality, and also there is a discussion on propensity to trust, might change this relationship. And so there is Alarcon et al. That has done a study in which he says that personality and trust are such that personality correlate with trust when you have ambiguous decision. Yeah, so it is a particular situation in which you are unsure, but there is no, it's not about time pressure, it's not about danger, it is just whether you are sure and or you are unsure. And this happens with humans. It doesn't happen if it's not being tried with robots. So the relationship with an artificial intelligence or a robot or an algorithm or so on is still to be researched. And in fact, what we want to know is whether the personality somehow change the trust. And we know this happens with human, but we don't know what happens with AI. So it is appropriate to investigate this. And in particular, I would like to present another traits. What we have found is a personality trait in itself, which is locus of control. So not only it depends on the personality that you have, but there is also an aspect of our personality that called locus of control, which is a person belief about the cause of his or her experience in an unpredictable situation. And so people that have an high internal locus of control feel in control of their life and feel they have to make things happen, while people that have got an external locus of control feel that things happen to them and that they are more relaxed, perhaps, about life. And this can be negative in the sense they say, oh, I can't do anything about it, or simply they're a bit more relaxed than the one with an internal locus of control. This is very important because, for example, if you consider the manager style of working with others, when we have a human-human interpersonal relationship, amongst human, manager that have got a high internal, an high or an internal locus of control, they tend to do things by themselves and make decisions by themselves, while those with an external locus of control tend to be more collaborative and ask opinion of others before making a decision, and they'll probably be more democratic. Or, of course, these are all speculation, but there is research that demonstrates they tend to be more consultative. Okay, and this brings us to our study. This is the study that I'm presenting. And the variable that we have considered, so we have manipulated the condition, our independent variable, which are you are either interacting with a human or you're interacting with an AI. Then we have considered the covariable, which is the factor that are intrinsic in yourself. And so the people 5-factor model of personality that we measure the personality, which is openness, consciousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, and also their locus of control. And then we have measured trust in 3 forms, and there is the whole literature about measuring trust. I will not go there, or we won't even finish for today this talk. But you can consider that there is you can measure trust as a response time, so that if I'm immediate in my response, obviously I trust immediately, I don't doubt it. Concordance, which means do I follow what the suggestion was? And also I can rate whether or not I felt that the person or AI I was interacting with was trustworthy. And so these are the measures that we considered. And so we set up the procedure. So we collected the demographic, then we collected the locus of control and personality. We allowed people to do practice trials, playing with this game that I will explain in a second. And then we had a control condition where people play the game with no suggestion. And then we had the condition where people were told they were playing with the suggestion of other participants from previous trials, or they had an AI that would suggest them what to do. And so then we measured these concordance translated and the participant feedback. We ran this with 171 participants all over the world. And you can see we try to divide it into Asia, wider Europe, Indian subcontinent, and others. But the spread, it is quite large. And in particular, the biggest component were United Kingdom, China, and India. So we have quite a spread of cultures, because culture has an effect as well, as you know. And then we made a very simple games, which is schematically represented here. This is a game that most people play as well. You have 5 cards. You start uncovering 1 card at a time, and you have to decide whether the next card will be higher or lower. And you can actually decide whether the card is higher or lower, or you can ask for a suggestion on the pattern. So in this case, you will have, you were presented already with 4 cards. So you had the kind of a sequence, and you were asked to guess the last card. And of course, people may have tried to make inference on this sequence of cards. But in fact, they were generated at random. And the way that it was done, there was a 50-50 chance that the last card was higher or lower. There is a probability that, of course, if you have a 1, then everything else will be higher. And if you have a 9, then everything else will be lower. But, the probability of this occurring, although it is significant, slightly significant for 1 person, so there are cases in which some of the choices are obvious, because we repeated this over 10 trials and over many participants. The probability of guessing just because of the sequence of the last card is very low, and so irrelevant for the results. And so people could also see whether the agent suggestion was correct or not, because after choosing higher or lower, they will have a feedback. And so over the 10 trial, they might build a trust or not. So what we found that there is an effect of locus of control, neuroticism, and openness on the different element of trust. So with regards to reaction time, only in the human condition, openness, which is your ability, like openness to experience, was such that people were quite fast. So the openness people were very fast in reacting. So they were just going for it. But in the human and AI condition, we found that locus of control and neuroticism decrease the concordance with the agent or the human in itself. and also the trust rating, so that people consider trust in human AI in the same manner, and we're not in this card game. There is no risk. There is only an ambiguity that you don't know what to choose. There is no particular environment. You are in a ludic game, and so under all this condition, our trust does not depend on the form of the AI, or because it's the same for human and AI, but it depends more on our personality traits. So what does it mean exactly that? So these are the results. So locus of control account for a significant variance on trust beyond the 5-factor model of personality. So the locus of control, we can just measure locus of control to find out whether or not a person will be trusting or not a human or indeed an AI. Neuroticism is negatively predicted trust rating. So people which are more neurotic are less willing to trust. And people in general, which is quite interesting, trusted the AI more than they trusted humans. And this is quite interesting in itself, that in absence of error, or let's say when they were, because if the AI kept on making mistake, of course, then people trust decreased. But in general, over the many trials and over the many people trusted the AI more than humans, which is something that we need to consider with regards to human. And so what are the implications? So as a computer scientist, this seems to be a very psychology grounded kind of research. In fact, it is in XAI. And for those that want to build artificial intelligence algorithm, and they want to ensure that there is a lot of discussion that we need to provide explanation for the AI behind our artificial intelligence algorithm. But what these results show is that, in fact, we don't have to provide explanation, but we need to see what kind of personality we're dealing with. And those that have got an internal locus of control, those that feel they determine their own fate, might need more explanation before they trust anybody, a human or an AI. And so they might need an explanation because they need to build the trust. But those that have got an external locus of control, they're more collaborative, or they're more used to, perhaps over time, for example, you get used to use the navigator and you are more relaxed about what happened, you might not need an explanation. While I think a person with an internal locus of control might still be checking the route of the navigator, even if the navigator is there. And then there is a second interesting thing, is that if to internal locus of control we also add neuroticism, we might need to build an algorithm that even more needs to provide explanation and build trust. And so this needs to be done over time. So not only is not a matter of providing the explanation, but it is more a matter of building the trust. And if the explanation can help building the trust, that's fine. But providing the explanation of the algorithm in itself might not change the fact that people trust the AI or not, which is a very interesting implication for all those that are trying to do explainable AI. And so I will leave you with this, and I just presented an investigation on trusting human or trusting AI, and trust remains a complex and multifaceted construct. And it is grounded in interpersonal relationship. And as this study demonstrates, we don't differentiate really between AI and humans, even though there was no voice, there was no no form of this AI in the game. There was just an arrow that would indicate whether you know, it should be higher or lower, and then you could go with it or not. And then the fact that we trust AI more than the human might also be grounded in the fact that we trust the algorithm when we do not, we're not able to rely on our knowledge, societal norm, and so on. And therefore, we trust the AI more than we will trust a human. But at the same time, I should say that we don't forgive the AI as much as we forgive the human. So although we trust them more, if the trust is broken, then the literature says that we also don't trust them. We don't recuperate if the trust is broken. And with this, I will leave you and I'll stop sharing, and I'm happy to accept any question. I just presented an overview of different problematic. I'm not proposing a solution, but I'm just in the context of computer science, highlighting that perhaps we don't need to explain, and the fact that people trust or not trust might be intrinsic in themselves.